I wasn't gonna make this a top 3, top 5, or really top anything kind of video, but you guys forced my hand. I could talk about any incredibly interesting topic like the sexiest salon butts in Warhammer, or how Valky the Bloody got her nickname, it's that time of month again, and you guys just sleep. But then I make the same goddamn video with the top 5 crammed in front, and you nerds are all splooging your pants, and YouTube's chomping at the bit for sloppy seconds. So fine, we'll have it your way. Top 3 incoming. Do you hear that, my friends? That's the sound of inevitability. That long-awaited Warriors of Chaos overhaul somewhere over the rainbow. We don't know when it's coming, but it is coming. The Dark Gods are inevitable, and they will not be denied. So today, I wanted to shift the spotlight to some of the missing units in the Warriors of Chaos 8th Edition Army Book, and rather than just paint a brief picture of their battlefield role, delve a bit deeper and explain why their inclusion is so important, so necessary, and how they will help fix an army that is feeling rather one-dimensional at this point in the life cycle of mortal empires. Now, Chaos is not a horrible faction in Warhammer 2 by any means, but let's face it, their campaign is incredibly outdated and one of the least pleasant to play in the entire franchise. And on the battlefield, they are lacking quite a bit of flavor and variety. What they do well, they do very well, with fantastic infantry choices, powerful chariots, and one of the best single entity monsters in the game with the mighty dragon ogre Shaggoth. But while they can compete, they are limited, and a big reason for that is that Marks of Chaos straight up don't exist in Mortal Empires right now at all. But that is bound to change like Tzeentch, and when it does, this faction will never be the same again. One of the core tenets of Warhammer Fantasy Battle is that Chaos marks us all, that every single race has been impacted by the primordial truth in one way or another. And for those in service to the ruinous powers, these marks take an all too physical and haunting form. This is how Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, and Nurgle mark their territory, granting golden showers to their greatest followers, and in so doing, claiming their souls, which serves as a warning to the other gods, like, hey, this one's mine. He is my territory, do not touch. And it's through these champions that the Chaos Gods flex their muscles on the mortal plane. I mean, demons are all fine and dandy, but they can't hang out in the material world for very long, as we well know. So, corrupting humanity with godly gifts can get them to do your dark bidding without needing to take a warp siesta when there isn't enough magic around, as is the case with a greater demon, for example. Now, the crazy thing about Marks of Chaos is that depending on how far Creative Assembly wants to push this mechanic, we won't be talking about 1 or 2 new units, we'll be talking about more than a dozen, enough to fill up entire armies. And at a cursory glance, they are a stupid, simple implementation, about as straightforward as it gets. The Mark of Khorne grants Frenzy, the Mark of Tzeentch grants a ward save and additional mana regen for casters, the Mark of Nurgle lowers melee attack of enemies, and the Mark of Slaanesh grants immune to psychology. So the idea here is that you can take a Chaos Knight or a Chosen unit and give it one of these 4 marks, slightly altering its battlefield role. But this barely scratches the surface for what can and should be done with the Marks of Chaos. There's both a visual element and a gameplay element that both need to be fully fleshed out for when Warhammer 3 rolls around. The visual element won't have any impact on unit performance whatsoever, but we don't play Total War just for the stats. That would be boring. If I wanted to, I'd be playing Paradox. There are already lots of slightly redundant units that are in the game simply because they add flavor and variety, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're added in the game because they look awesome. It's that simple. And as we stated earlier, when a Chosen receives the Mark of Nurgle, he edges closer to becoming the physical manifestation of his patron god. He looks different. You can't just paint these units red, green, pink, and blue and call it a day. No, a Nurgle Chosen becomes swollen and distended. Their armor becomes pocked with fester and buboes. A wicked tongue might worm and flick its way out of the one remaining slit in its cracked, desiccated helmet, and a stinking miasma rises from their putrid flesh. So when you're talking about Chaos Warriors, Chaos Knights, and Chosen, these form the foundation for each of the god-specific factions, and visually, they will look entirely distinct from their brothers, which is great because we want cool-looking units. It's a big reason why we play this series in the first place. But these marks also inform their role on the battlefield, and the part of this that has me really excited is just how far that idea can be pushed. Yeah, they've got their army book marks, the Frenzy, Ward Save, Melee Attack Debuff, and Immune to Psychology, but there is absolutely no reason to stop there. Weapon types, abilities, stat bonuses, and mounts could completely transform two Chosen variants or two Chaos Knight variants into completely different units with completely different battlefield applications. Khorne variants would have exceptionally high armor, high melee attack, and magic resistance, favoring dual wielding and massive axes as their weapons of choice. Tzeentch variants would have magic attacks, a built-in ward save, bonuses to Winds of Magic generation, and possibly even bounce spells like the Fires of Change. Nurgle units would be slower than the average, but much more resilient, an inexorable wall of measured plotting death, with regen, high defensive values, a minus melee attack aura, and Man Reaper scythes for slicing their way through chaff, while Slaaneshi variants would be more fragile than the others, but much faster, with immunity to terror, high armor-piercing values, and a narcotic musk that lulls their enemies into a false sense of security. And there are almost limitless variations that can be created based off these standard archetypes, from Regiments of Renown to the god-specific mounts like Plague Toads, switching out weapons and abilities and visuals as you see fit. But the reason why this is so important is not just for the flavor and the additional fun, which is a really important factor. It's a big reason why we play video games in the first place, but it will truly have an enormous impact on the Chaos roster itself, in filling holes that have been left untouched for years, holes that should have never existed in the first place. Take Undivided Chosen, for example. They're already in the game, with a Halberd variant, a Sword and Board variant, and a Great Weapon variant, and they are all good units. Maybe not viable against every single faction, but you can fit one or two in pretty much any build and feel confident they will perform well. And you can go full stacks with them in campaign and kick ass and take names. Fantastic stats overall, huge HP pool, they're tough to bring down, and they have pretty high base leadership of 85 as well. But one of the biggest issues they face is that in late game situations, they can be very susceptible to terror. And I think most of us have seen this before or experienced it ourselves. Your army is beaten up, but you're winning. All your opponent has left is maybe one or two single entity monsters that are low in HP. They're terror causing, and you just need your troops to hold and land a few attacks anytime it comes back around for another go. But the terror keeps kicking in. Your Chosen keep running away, and finally, they break for good. Well, I'll say it right now, it's a teeny bit embarrassing for the Chosen of the Dark Gods, right? When your 1300 gold elite infantry unit that's supposed to be the biggest and scariest in Warhammer is running away during the most critical moments of a battle, you're in for a bad time. It doesn't feel very good. But right from the word go, Marks of Chaos give players the option to circumvent this issue entirely, to circumvent any number of problems that a regular Chosen might face and put them into a different battlefield role. So whether it's from a visual or a gameplay perspective, the Eye of the Gods is going to completely change how Chaos looks, how they feel, how they play, and add an absurd amount of variety to Total War Warhammer 3. But coming in at number 2, we have Hellstriders of Slaanesh, a unit that will utterly break the mold when it comes to Chaos and their battlefield presence. But to fully understand how Hellstriders will impact the roster, we have to understand Chaos Knights and the role they play, and the problems they face. Now, Chaos Knights are a pretty solid unit overall. The Sword and Board variant especially can be a game-changing force in quite a few matchups. Against the Wood Elves, for example, they are a go-to pick. With their high armor, their big HP pool, their shield, and huge melee defense, it means they can grind out in CQB better than pretty much any other cav in the game, and also resist missile pressure a lot better as well. They are very tough to kill. It's just that, unlike everyone else with heavy cavalry, Chaos doesn't have healing, and the Lance variant in particular suffers greatly against sources of AP damage because their melee defense isn't that great. They used to look pretty incredible with their 80 charge bonus, but while normal Chaos Knights have sort of found a niche in quite a few matchups, the Lance version maybe not so much, even though on paper they're not a bad unit by any stretch of the imagination. The main issue with Chaos Knights is that their whole army roster is quite one-dimensional. Chaos as a whole is very one-dimensional. The Warriors of Chaos don't have any cheap melee cavalry to support their engagements, nor cheap missile infantry that can fire in from behind their battle line. They don't have any impressive AoE buffs or dirt cheap unbreakable units to help anchor the line or help support in the cav fight, and they don't have summons. And perhaps more importantly, the 66 speed is an often overlooked but particularly damaging problem for them. They just aren't very fast, and they don't synergize very well with Chaos Warhounds because they aren't quick enough to capitalize on any good engagements that might arise from what the doggos are doing. So it's no surprise that Dragon Ogre Shaggoths are usually the more competitive choice overall, and Chaos Knights have kind of been phased out. These problems will, in and of themselves, be mitigated by the Marks of Chaos, as the Chaos Knight marked by Slaanesh could move about 20% faster than the next fastest variant and have additional AP to help round them out. But why would we stop there? There's no reason to. There's another unit in the Warriors of Chaos army book that is built for versatility and glass cannon punching power around that speed, and these are the Hellstriders of Slaanesh. Now, these are technically Marauders, but mounted on Slaaneshi steeds, they function more like Doomfire Warlocks, becoming a high-end light cavalry unit wielding Hellscourge whips and filling the role of elite light cavalry. Like everything Slaaneshi, they have armor piercing and are incredibly fast, moving at 90 plus speed in Total War Warhammer 3. That'll be the translation from their movement 10 on tabletop, which was the fastest any land unit could move in 8th edition. They have poison and magical attacks, they cause fear, and have a crazy special rule called Soul Hunters that grants bonuses the more units they kill. So the first threshold is called Fueled by Pain, and it gives them a higher charge bonus. The next one is Intoxicating Delirium, gives them higher leadership, and Insensible to Agony is the third threshold, and it gives them a 20% ward save. So the more you kill, the better the unit will perform. This is exactly the type of unit Chaos needs for better battlefield control, because at the moment, they're basically a one-trick pony built purely around rushing, but they don't really have the speed to quickly capitalize on an opponent's mistakes. They're not like the Wood Elves who can quickly jump on that or net something down in place and isolate and destroy it. They're a bit too slow for that. They're also not that great at running down routing troops, and this is a role the Hellstriders will fill exceptionally well. They're an incredibly unique unit, one of the few light cav regiments in the setting that deals armor-piercing damage. So as flankers and support for a big scrum on the periphery, there are very few options that can outperform Hellstriders on the battlefield. They will be very expensive though, which is the one other major weakness of Chaos, that their builds are narrow and cost an arm and a leg to field. And these won't do much to help that problem, as they'll likely fall around the 1100 gold mark at the very least, and I would not be surprised in the slightest to see them more around Doomfire Warlock status at 12 to 1300, unless CA decides to go the White Lion route and kick them down a tier to a cheaper price point. But there's no question in my mind, they are going to do wonders for this roster, as will units like Skullcrushers of Khorne, for example, who will finally give Chaos a monstrous cav option that can beat the brakes off Demigryph Knights. But Dragon Ogre Shaggoths already filled that role pretty well, so there are others who will shape the roster more dynamically than Skullcrushers of Khorne. And the one that really jumps out in my mind that does something that nothing else on the Chaos roster does is a Freakazoid mutant monstrosity marked by Tzeentch. So coming in at number 3, we have the Mutolith Vortex Beast. And this thing is a hentai monster out of your worst nightmares. To stare into its orbs is to stare into the void, into the very soul of Chaos. And as you might imagine, there are very few with the mental fortitude required to keep their sanity intact after something that horrific. This is a centerpiece monster unit almost like a Mortis engine, a tentacle beast that will serve as your win condition. If you're able to keep it alive, you will win the game. It's that simple. It will be the first thing your opponent tries to shoot down with artillery, with Weight Watchers, with armor-piercing volleys from long range, and they will invest a ton into trying to murder it. And if they are unable to, you are going to win. So, picture a regenerating elephant squid tethered to an orb of raw chaos energy, pure warp magic. Just by their very nature, with tentacles and gnashing teeth, they can shred entire regiments, but the magic that infuses this beast is what turns it so deadly, because where it treads, where it walks on the battlefield, mutation inexorably follows, unleashing a blast of energy that turns people into goo, that causes them to sprout extra limbs and heads, that causes their spines to burst out of their backs and strangle them to death, or force them to go insane. So in 8th edition, the aura of mutation that kind of permeates the area around this monster is a direct damage spell that can grant an enemy the fear special rule as they're hideously disfigured. So take that Empire State Troop over there and just turn them into a scary monster that causes fear, but they're taking damage at the same time and their faces are warping into a hellish parody of what it once was. Or it can make them stupid as their brains are converted into those of a troll. On a good roll, the Aura of Mutation will turn an enemy unit into Chaos Spawn, just like Morgur, all while the direct damage spell does its work as well. So in Total War Warhammer, giving it 3 direct damage spells that can only be used once would be a pretty good way to demonstrate its powers. One would lower melee defense, another would lower leadership, and the final spell could be implemented exactly like Morgur's Chaos Spawn summon, only being targetable on a unit that's close to death, and then summoning a Chaos Spawn unit in its place. Or its damage output could be implemented just like a Mortis engine, draining the life force from any enemies until those special effects have time to be transferred into their unlucky prey. You can see from its tabletop role and the army book page itself, there are a lot of special rules. There's a lot of crazy things Creative Assembly could do with it, but I think either one of those could work out pretty well. But as you can see, the Mutalith Vortex Beast is special. It is wildly unique and has a clear-cut battlefield role that no other unit on the Warriors of Chaos roster fills. It combines the melee output of a big, bruising behemoth with the warp shenanigans of the Changer of Ways, and gives them a direct damage source outside the traditional Lords of Metal and Death. Yes, you'll be seeing Final Transmutations and Spirit Leeches and Fate of Bunas, but this gives you a unit that also can double in melee combat, which is a pretty important way to save money for the Chaos roster. They need every inch they can get. So when you combine the Marks of Chaos and the insane variety they'll bring to the table all by themselves, with the speed and surgical precision of Sineshi Hellstriders and the pure, untamable magical storms of the Vortex Beast, you're looking at some super flavorful additions that will completely change the game for Chaos as we head into Warhammer 3. It will completely change how they're able to take on battlefield roles, and they're going to be much better as a result of these unit additions. So I'm curious, what elements of the missing Chaos roster do you guys personally feel like will make the biggest impact, or best fill a lacking aspect of their current gameplay? What do you feel like are the most important additions Creative Assembly could make for the Warriors of Chaos moving forward? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.